And now, ladies and gentlemen, on the revolutionary step in the world of sports, I'd like to welcome Mr. John Lee, the venture capitalist and investor of the USA and Asia, to deliver his presentation on esports. Please give him the biggest round of applause.
Hi, everyone. Can the audience see the slides that were prepared for this speech? Okay, great. I'm going to be reading off the slides directly. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I've been working in esports since 2014. Oh, thank you very much. I started out as the founding executive chairman of Asia for ESL, which is the largest esports league in the world. Recently joined as a board member and strategic advisor for Epicenter, which is the largest esports league in CIS, Eastern Europe and Russia. Before this, I spent about 10 years in the video game industry as various executive roles. And early in my career, I was a consultant with McKinsey & Company, as well as with SoftBank Venture Capital as a investment associate. So I'm going to split the presentation into four big parts. The first part is really talking about the market sizing and the kind of the metrics that are in the industry at the moment. Second part I'm going to talk about is why esports is so interesting, particularly for global advertisers, corporates, and sponsorships. Third, I'm going to go over a little bit about what esports is. And then finally, I'm going to add some kind of personal editorial and my own personal thoughts of where esports is headed. So on the first slide, you can see kind of market sizing of esports in 2019. I'm not going to read over the slides. You can look on it directly, but you can see that the market is growing. 2018 broke the $1 billion mark, and on a CAGR of annual about 30%. The next slide is really looking at esports compared to other traditional sports. I think what's interesting on this slide is looking at the size of the audience. The size of audience in esports is growing very, very quickly. It's at the fastest growing category in the world. If you want to talk about the sizing of sports, like the NFL/Super Bowl has about 110 million followers on an annual basis. Esports is around that same number right now. FIFA is around 300 to 600 million, depending on what the viewership for the World Cup would be on every 4-year basis. This is also already larger than the NBA, the Major League Baseball, as well as other sports like, let's say, PGA, which is largely stagnant. The National Hockey League in the US is also stagnant. However, the other graph that you'll see on this page is the revenues. Now, the revenues on esports compared to these other sports is very, very small. And you look at the graph size, it's really dwarfed by the other professional leagues. Again, this is another slide on the evolution of esports, just talking about the revenue growth going forward. But I think expounding on the earlier slide, it's really looking at the massive growth opportunity in esports going forward. Again, comparing to traditional sports, the amount of monetization and revenues is very, very small compared to the other traditional sports. I think on the right-hand side, the revenues per fan is really telling. The monetization of esports compared to, let's say, the National Football League in the US is under-monetized by 14 times. So there's a lot of growth potential as well as monetization going forward. This slide is really just going over what the esports ecosystem is. Now, for anyone in the audience that comes from a traditional sports background, I get a question very often: how does esports differ from a traditional sport? Well, the value system is actually very, very similar. However, there's one key difference. The key difference in esports is because the games themselves are owned, developed by independent game companies, such as Activision, such as Blizzard, such as Riot, such as Supercell. You have a phenomena that does not take place in the traditional sports world. So, for example, if there's any tennis players in the audience, imagine if the World Tennis Association was owned by Babylon. Or if there's any golf players in the audience, imagine if the PGA was owned by Titleist. Or if there's any baseball players, or not baseball, I know you don't play baseball in this country, but if there are any if there are any football fans in the audience, it's like having FIFA being owned by a privately owned institution. So that's really the key difference in esports versus traditional sports. Esports, because the game companies own the actual sport itself, they can change the rules on a yearly basis, as well as they control all the ecosystem in the league. They control all the media rights in the league. And so this is a very, very big difference. So if you're looking at the actual value chain, the value chain for anyone in sports can see that it's very, very similar. However, the key difference is the game companies exert a lot of control over this ecosystem. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about why esports is getting so big and why it's actually monetizing quickly. The reason why it's really monetizing quickly is we're talking about millennials as well as Generation Z. Now, this is a generation, again, I'm not really that familiar with the Pakistani market, but in the West as well as the East, particularly looking at the US market, the European market, and Asia, Japan, Korea, China, millennials and the demographics younger than millennials, they're no longer watching television. They watch YouTube. They watch Twitch. If in China they're watching like a Huya. They basically will have an activity where they go to school in the daytime. Maybe they'll play a traditional sport while they're at school. But as soon as they get home, they're not jumping on the television like we did when we were young. They're jumping on their computers, they're jumping on their tablets, or even watching on their phones, and they're watching game videos, they're watching streaming videos, and then they're actually also playing these games themselves. And this is actually a key difference because the way that the brand owners used to reach these demographics is on television. They would have like advertising time and commercials and whatnot. They can't reach these people using these traditional channels anymore. And esports is interesting for them is because this demographic, they're spending all their time playing and watching esports related videos. Again, these are a couple more statistics, again, on the millennial market. But when you have events in esports, the events are being, the actual event sponsors compared to traditional sports sponsors are actually much, much higher. I'm going to go a little bit about kind of, okay, what is an esport? What kind of games are relevant? There are a couple tiers in esports worldwide we call first, second, and third tier. I'm not going to go into this list too much, but the 6 games that make the most difference is on the next slide. So the 6 games that are the biggest in the world right now, largest is Fortnite, second is League of Legends, then Counter-Strike, Dota, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and then Hearthstone. This is an interesting list because each one of these games you have to consider as a different kind of sport. So the overlap between, let's say, Counter-Strike and Fortnite is very, very low. The overlap between League of Legends and Dota, although the games are very similar, is very, very low. People may look at the game and think it's like, oh, well, Dota and League of Legends look very similar. There's a 5-person game, it's a capture the flag mechanic. But it's the same analogy as saying, it's like, okay, well, I'm watching someone play squash, I'm watching someone play racquetball. So they both use a racket, so isn't it the same sport? The actual mechanics, the strategy, everything, the skills used in the games are very, very different. The same thing with like this battle royale format. The players in Fortnite and the players in PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, they may be both battle royale games, but there's very, very overlap in the actual demographic and the user base. And don't take my word for it. There are a lot of very, very big players entering the arena of esports. Again, I'm not going to go over the list you can see, but these are very, very big traditional team organizations. These are large brand advertisers such as Mercedes-Benz. Professional athletes are also getting into this space, as well as large media groups are also getting into this space. What is an esport event? Well, it's really what we call an arena-style event. This slide is actually a little bit of outdated because this is an event from 2016. But I'm going to jump ahead a couple slides and then come back. But this is the event that was held last year in Shanghai. So you can see this is a packed event. These tickets for not even the VIP box seats, but the normal seats were selling secondhand the day before the event for $4,000 a ticket. Now, you're not going to see this kind of phenomena in every market around the world. However, in, let's say, a Frankfurt, a Hamburg, a Berlin, a Shanghai, a Seoul, a Tokyo, an LA, when you're having these events are always sold out. And the secondary market for the tickets are selling at usually a 3, 4, 5 time premium over the actual ticket price. And this type of phenomena over time is going to be expanding on a worldwide basis. Another point on this slide is interesting is the amount of prize money that's being awarded at these events. In the 2019 Fortnite World Cup that was held at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York, where they held the US Open every year, they gave 3 first prize of $3 million each. So they gave a total prize pool to the 3, I would say, finalists of the event of $3 million each. In comparison, we're talking about tennis. Djokovic, when he won the US Open, only won $2.9 million, and then a fraction of that was given to the person that won, was in the finals with him. In esports, the typical first prize winners are winning $3 million, $4 million, $5 million prize pools. In the TI, which stands for the international, the Dota 2 worldwide finals, this year's finalists, they won a prize pool of $12 million. And that was split between a team of 5 players. But the amount of prize money that's being generated at these events is really, really phenomenal and has already outpaced traditional prize pools that you might see at like a World Tennis Association event or a PGA event. I'm just going to give a couple closing thoughts on like kind of what the industry is, in my opinion, what I see what the future is. I just arrived this morning, so I'm not really sure what the format is, whether it's a Q&A or whatnot. But if there is not a QA, kind of like a format, people can come up to me after my speech and ask me questions. So my closing thoughts on this and the future is we're really in the very, very early stages of esports and its evolution. One thing I would say is we're really looking at a globalization of esports. Right now, it's being dominated by what I would call like developed markets, such as China, such as Korea, such as Japan, such as the US and Europe. But then you're going to be seeing an expansion of esports. In the next 5 years, personally, I see a lot of movement in Southeast Asia, South Asia, such as India, and in Latin America and South America. I mean, in my last position, I spent a lot of time going to Argentina, Brazil, as well as India. I was at ESL, my former employee, we signed a JV in the Indian market, which I was like leading. And we saw India as one of the kind of like the next big markets for esports, which is already witnessed by an expansion of not 1, but now 10 leagues in India alone just for esports. Another thing is going to be driving the market is more and more games. So if you look at my earlier slide here, there's 6 dominant games around the world. These are all based on PC. What's interesting going forward is I think more games are going to be coming out that are going to be more global. That's going to be driven by mobile, particularly the advent of 5G, as well as augmented reality and virtual reality is also going to be driving these type of games. What would an augmented reality or a virtual reality game look like? Well, I'm not really sure, but it's going to probably combine both gameplay and traditional types of athleticism. So if there's any, like, let's say Star Wars fans in the audience, my personal thought on like what an esport in the future would be lightsaber battles using AR and VR. You have like hundreds of millions of fans around the world who grew up like sword fighting amongst themselves, like playing, Jedi versus Sith. This is something that would immediately have impact as a sport if you could figure out how the technology would work. Another driving force is the IOC. The IOC is already studying ways of including esports as an official medal sport. This is also going to be driving adoption on a worldwide basis. And then countries around the world are going to have to think about what their Olympic training protocols and programs are going to be around esports and what kind of regimes and what kind of like athlete selections and whatnot. This is also going to drive this esports in a very, very big way. I think tournament formats are going to expand. Right now, most esports tournaments are really driven, I think, around either a Premier League model or a tennis model. So what's the tennis model? Well, ESL, our model is effectively we hold events all around the world. Every event is a standalone event, very similar to how Wimbledon, the French Open, the Australian Open, and the US Open work. So each event has its own qualifying rounds, but each event is a standalone event that doesn't qualify for the other event. The Premier League model is also very relevant here, where you have like the top 10 teams in every regional league with a relegation match at the end of every season, where the bottom team may play with the top team coming up from the semi-pro league. Now, what kind of expansion would we see on the format side? Well, for example, there's no World Cup format for esports. The reason why there's no World Cup format for esport is because esport is still in its infancy and still at that cusp of becoming truly globalized. But when esports become globalized, then you have an opportunity for, let's say, a emerging market to beat a developed market. And I think that's the great thing about the World Cup. The World Cup, you can see a team like Croatia get to the World Finals. I actually attended the World Cup this past year. I went to the semifinals in Russia, expecting that Croatia would lose to England, and England would fight France in the finals. Instead, Croatia beat England to the shock of everyone in the world. But that's the beauty of the World Cup, is that you can have a team like Croatia come out of nowhere and get all the way to the finals. In 2002, I attended a World Cup where Korea got to the Final Four, which was expected not even to get past the first round of elimination. That's the beauty of World Cup. Now, going back to esport, why is there not a World Cup format right now? It's because it's really dominated by maybe Germany, Korea, China, and the US. So even if you had a World Cup format, it wouldn't be that really equal for all countries around the world. But I think more and more over time, you're going to see these type of formats. Other type of formats we might see would be, there's no NCAA format, there's no university format, there's no high school varsity format, there's no little league format. Right now, it's actually the implementation of what we would call tournament formats in esports are very, very limited. And I think, again, closing off, I think mobile is going to be a big equalizer when it comes to esports. None of the titles that I showed you here are mobile. They're all on PC. But what are everyone playing these days? They're all playing their games on their mobile phones. So there will be a globalizing esport, and it's probably going to be on mobile, and this is going to be the platform that brings all the countries together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Lee, for the excellent presentation, as well as the future of sports, and that is esports. Yes, please. Thank you. And now, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to hand over the tokens of appreciation to our speakers, please allow me to invite to the stage Mr. Muhammad Asfar Askan. Please give him the biggest round of applause. Yes, Mr. Muhammad Asfar Askan will hand out the token of appreciation to our dear speakers. For that, we invite all the speakers to please stand in the middle of the stage. And also, Mr. Ali Akai from Martin Dow to please come up on stage. Please give him the biggest round of applause. Yes, we'd like to hand out the first token of appreciation to Ms. Tara Love Perry, the author and speaker from the United Kingdom, who's had what I could only say was the most positive vibration in the room. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, please give her the biggest round of applause. How refreshing was her session. And next, would also like to hand out the tokens to Sumaya Hassan and Farzana Yaqub. These ladies that insisted as well as emphasized on how important it is to have women in leadership. Please give them the big round of applause. And next, on the world of esports, Mr. John Lee, the venture capitalist and investor of the USA and Asia on esports. Please let us give Mr. John Lee a big round of applause. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, everyone here standing on stage are the future esports women in leadership, a must in reinventing the future, as well as the importance it is to loving yourself and consciousness emphasized by Ms. Tara Love Perry.